Hey y'all, it's Candice. Welcome back to part 2 of our Caregivers episodes. To catch you up from the last episode, at the end we were discussing accommodations that Puck was making in their home to accommodate Rachel's fragrance sensitivities. Just wanted you guys to know where we left off while you enjoy this next episode. Thanks. You're listening to Mastcast, an SM podcast where your hosts, Candice and Rachael, explore the complexities of living with a rare chronic disease through personal experience, patient guest stories, caregiver perspectives, insights from specialists, and updates from the research and advocacy communities, with the purpose of bringing knowledge, connection, and hope to those affected with mastocytosis and related conditions.
We recently just discovered that we needed to change our water system, and not a ton, but there was chlorine in the water, and it was being put in the water because I have a well system, and we're finding alternatives for that because that was irritating Rachel's skin as well. Like enough that we could tell the difference between when she was in Philly and when she was at the farm.
I also knew exactly when the chlorine ran out. And I was like, I think your chlorine ran out because I didn't have a reaction to the water. And so trying to come up with these big systems, and they cost money, trying to figure out how to do laundry differently or buy a new mattress or change the water system. Those are not small things. And it's I feel so fortunate to have not only Adam and Puck, but other people in my life who are willing to accommodate me in these ways. It feels like such a privilege, but it should be a privilege that everybody has access to. It's made my life better exponentially. Alternatively, and Adam, I think you could speak to this more, but I know that there's been things Adam has been doing for me for forever that he takes care of certain tasks, like household tasks. I can't. With this incoming storm, the snowblower needs gas. I can't go get the gas because I can't put it in my car. Adam, do you want to speak to some of the other things, places you used to work that have caused problems and how you navigated those things?
On the topic of deodorant and showers and soaps and things like that, I'm pretty sure I've gone through, just through trial and error, I've gone through probably half a dozen of each until, something doesn't set Rachel off. So, it's just finding things, it's slowly trying things and finding things that work and things like that. But one of the jobs that I had, I was working in, I want to say, an oil soaked building. And this was kind of the beginning of COVID. And what I found was that after working there for a little bit, even after leaving, I would come home, I would shower, I would change everything, all my clothes, no matter whether I've been there for an hour, all day, whatnot. I would come home, shower, change, and I'd put a separate laundry bin for these work clothes in our laundry room. So that way, I'm not mixing my oily, smelly clothes with Rachel's clothes. With the normal clothes. And then probably 6 or 8 months into working there, Rachel realized that I was smelling like this place even on the weekends when I hadn't been at work. And that was, it was almost like the smell and the oils, the chemicals were coming out of my skin, as I was using the gym, doing yard work, that kind of stuff. So, once we realized that, I started looking for a new job. And, it's weird going into a job interview, crushing all the questions, making sure, getting great responses from all the interviewers, and then leaving, realizing that I can't work there because the chemicals or the processes that they use would make me, how do I say, radioactive to Rachel. She would not be able to come anywhere near me just from working there.
Is that
unfortunate?
because of the industry that you work in, or?
For clarity, Adam is a manufacturing engineer. So when he's on the plant floor, Adam, maybe you could explain that certain places put filters on these machines and other ones do not, and it's all
yes. So if I found, I'm pretty sure, I don't know that I could ever work in a real big metal shop again because of all the cutting fluids and oils and things that they use to make their processes work. I don't think I'll be able to do that again. Unfortunately, I've been able to find a manufacturing job that deals mostly in wood. Unfortunately, it also deals in fiberglass, so I come home itching a lot of the time.
Oh, no.
It's great. but yeah, it's I worked in the building specifically was old building from like the 1930s, 1940s, where they all had the old manufacturing machines where none of them had housings, none of them had oil filters. So all this oil was floating in the air for, 50 years. And a lot of those machines are still there. So then, going
And I know the
in, day
exact
out.
smell that you're talking about, and it's a shame that it's reactive because I love that smell. Like, but I also love a lot of smells I think that are probably harmful, like spray paint, gasoline, like,
Yeah,
uh,
diesel. Yeah.
one of my favorite scents in the world is auto body filler. So, like, when you're working on a car and you need to fill in, the brand is called Bondo, and that is like a core scent from my childhood. And so, and other people will be like, "Oh my god, it stinks in here." I'm like, "I love this," but now we have this new perspective. Like some of these things, uh, they really do get into your clothes, and then maybe even your skin, your hair, and then you bring that home to someone you care about, and suddenly, they're having a reaction to someplace that you were earlier, yeah, it's
And
really
also to
interesting.
something that you really like, that you love. I wonder, it's a lot to ask people to make these big changes in how they live and how they show up for you and everything. So I think it's interesting, or I think it's challenging. I know personally, as much as I try to be so caring and kind and accommodating, there's a little bit of a moment where I'm like, but that's inconvenient to me. Or, but I like that thing. And I have to check myself when I do that because it's like, who gives a shit? Like, it's okay. You can accommodate. And there is this kind of like, I think I have that knee jerk reaction too, to like, if plans change suddenly and dramatically, it can be hard. So I wonder, have any of you as people who've had to accommodate had that kind of internal reaction first, or have you had to kind of grapple with, like, I'm just being honest about how I am as a person. I have to really think through that kind of stuff and like really pause and assess and ask myself some questions, and then how do I want to proceed going forward. And I'm curious if any of you have had that kind of internal reaction and had to navigate that for yourself. And I didn't call on anybody, but Puck, you look like you have an answer for that. So
So
I'd love to hear.
earlier when Adam and Denny were talking about how they deal with like being a partner who needs to make accommodations, it sounds like it comes very naturally to them both to like put their partners first. And like I also have some similar feelings, but as a spoonie myself, as somebody who's chronically ill myself, I always also have to like check in with myself and as a parent, because like I have to be able to do certain things like by the time my kids get home from school or whatever with
And I'm sorry,
them and like
could you explain what a spoonie is?
yeah. So the spoon theory is it's a lot like currency. So you start the day with a certain amount of spoons, and it's different for each person, but it's also different for each day. And a lot of times, Rachel will wake up and say, like, my bucket is already close to the top today. So like, if I go to pull, I'm going to start out my day with overflowing my bucket. And so I know she'll have to like skip something like that. But for me, a lot of times it's the more emotional aspect of things that, if Rachel's having a hard time, a lot of times, not a lot of times, sometimes it will come back to like something that we've been going through or talking about as a couple. And that thing will get magnified like 10 times, or 100 times because of the allergic reaction that her brain's having. And it sends her into fight or flight. And like, sometimes can show up and be like the best partner and totally share that burden. And sometimes I have to be like, I'm also struggling.
Hmm.
And like today, I can't
Hmm.
share this burden with you. And that's like,
Feel that.
it's its own thing, where I'm like, I want to be the best at all the things.
Hmm.
And there's only so much bandwidth and there are only so many spoons. So, like, when you start out the day with a certain amount of spoons and then you have to use a spoon to shower and you have to use a spoon to go out and like talk, I have to talk to my kids and get them off to the bus. And then I have to make sure that I save enough spoons so that I can have patience with them towards the end of the day when they get home from school and they're tired or they're hungry or they're just acting like kids. They're very loud kids. I'm a very big extrovert and my kids are also very big extroverts. And so I have to save my spoons for that. And if Rachel's had a bad allergic reaction, sometimes we have to take space, and that can be harder for her when she's having a reaction. And I think it's scary. And so I try to be reassuring, but there's also this part in me like, the initial reaction of like, this is harder,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is
because of,
interesting because like the dynamic that y'all have, both being chronically ill and, and so you're both, you know, starting out your days. Is it without a lot of spoons
With
or
so it just
yeah, without a
depends.
lot of spoons.
okay. So, and then throw on top of that the way that the world is going right now, so that you're already starting in this huge deficit like every day. At least Candice and I are. And so not only are you trying to like just, survive and kind of be a buoy for this person that you care about, it's like this added everything on top, and that
Hmm.
makes it a lot harder too. I feel like there's so many days I start and I don't have a fucking spoon to eat cereal with. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like, but then you look at this person and you're like, okay, this gives me some focus and a reason. This gives me a purpose, and it helps to kind of for that moment eliminate all the other noise and be like, okay, how can I help this person and make them feel better? And then that makes you feel a little bit better when you do that, you know?
Hmm. I totally agree. And I also think that this is like, I think it's highlighted because we're both chronically ill, but I also don't think it's exclusive to that. Like, I know that there's days where Adam's really stressed out about some big project at work, right?
Mhm.
And that's, or, in other people's lives might be like they're worried about the bills, or they have like a sick parent, or they're like some other life thing going on, or like, as Annie said, like the world burning around us. And I think that those things, like the word spoons in this instance could really be like exchanged for the word bandwidth, right? Like you just don't have the bandwidth for it, if that makes more sense to some folks who aren't as familiar with spoon theory. And I also think that there's a lot of ways that, like, both in my relationship with Adam and my relationship with Puck, that and I think it's a little bit different because they're very different relationships. Like, we've learned to navigate that a bit better. Like Adam and I talk things out in a different way than I talk things out with Puck, because that's just how like our dynamic works better for the people involved. And for Puck and I, like, we've gotten better at you being like, hey, I think you're having an allergic reaction. Why don't we circle back and talk about this when you're feeling better? And instead of being like, no, I'm fine. I just don't want to talk about it, because sometimes in that headspace, I'm like, I'm so sure I'm fine, and that I'm just having big feelings. I've gotten better at recognizing that that's probably not the case if I'm suddenly having really big feelings. And sometimes it, like, to illustrate what Puck was explaining, sometimes it is something that we already resolved, that I was not upset about anymore, that suddenly, like, I forgot that we had resolved it, or that I was over those feelings. And suddenly I am upset again because I don't realize that, like, my brain's not functioning on a normal level. But we've gotten better. I think that happens less now than when we first started dating.
But also, allergic reactions don't happen on a convenient schedule.
Oh my God,
You know,
not at all.
No.
we had that
Could I schedule them in? Is that an option? Can I pencil them in somewhere? I'll, like, put aside a
exposure
Thursday somewhere.
therapy. Does that work?
No, it
No,
doesn't.
it doesn't.
That makes things so much worse.
Yeah. We've had things where we're out and about and then there's an allergic reaction and it's like not the time or place. And I'm like, no, we do have to stop and we have to address it. And there is this feeling like we shouldn't have to be doing this. And it isn't like you shouldn't be making us do this. That's never the way that I take it. Like this is something that we
No one
are
should have to
dealing
deal
with
with.
together, and there is a feeling that like it shouldn't be this way, and this is the way that it is. And like I love you for who you are and how you are, and I'm very lucky that you've had these experiences because of the experiences that I'm going through currently
Yeah, there's a
with
lot of
long
empathy there
COVID.
because you can really like know what that feels like and looks like. Yeah. And I did want to just to like circle back to the spoon theory and then the bucket thing. We talked about two things, and just to help people understand some language because it might be helpful for them, or also they might see it around.
Mhm.
In the world of EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I'm also hypermobile. I manage, but it causes me a lot of like chronic pain and some instability in my joints. But that's kind of the spoonies thing. I feel like
started in that space, or like in that chronic illness space where you have chronic fatigue and exhaustion. And some days you wake up and you're just fully exhausted. And so the spoon idea is, yeah, it's like you're using a spoon for each activity. And some days you have like a whole drawer full, and then some days you have one, and it can fluctuate. And it's just a way to illustrate the idea of each day I have a different limited amount of
capacity.
energy to use
Yeah.
toward the day, that tasks you need to get done in a day as a person.
Exactly. And then we talked about you mentioned having a bucket. And so in the world of like allergic reactions and that sort of thing, you'll hear people talk about that. Like maybe even a doctor, like doctors have kind of explained it to me that way. This idea of you have like a histamine bucket, if you will. I don't know if histamine's really the right chemical, but you just have, some days you wake up and your bucket's half full. And that means if you're exposed to 2 or 3 things throughout the day that you react to, your bucket becomes full. And sometimes it can tip, and that can be like a severe allergic reaction or anaphylaxis or something. And so you're always kind of trying to feel out how full is your bucket? How much can you take on before it tips or before it becomes a real, like too full to handle or to carry? And so it's just like these visual cues. I just wanted to like lay that out a little bit so that when people hear that, they kind of understand what we're talking about.
We skipped out on thrift shopping yesterday because that's a lot of.
I love thrift stores so much, and I'm so allergic to them.
It fills your bucket real quick and overflows.
Yeah. There's a lot of
Had to
scent
pick
in there.
another
There's
day.
a lot of, it does.
So I was
It happens.
wondering, like, I know that for myself, who I'm not reactive to scent. I'm definitely more cognizant of scent now, but I'm not reactive to it in the way that y'all are. But I noticed that, like, when I wear a mask, it really cuts down on scent. Does it cut down on reactions too?
So that's a good question. So for me, so I find that so my sensitivities are pretty severe. I've met other folks with mast cell diseases who have like as severe as I do, but there's a limited number. Like most people, I would say don't. Mine's like above average, even for our community. And so I find that one mask doesn't seem to cut enough of it out. 2 masks, so like I don't know if we're going to be sharing the video, but I literally like have 2 separate masks. I think it's a KN90. I think it's a KN94 and a KN95, just because I like the way they fit my face. The KN94 is a little bit smaller than some of the other size masks. And I usually layer them. They're the same color so that no one comments on the fact that I'm wearing 2 masks. There was a point in time where I had different colors and people made awkward comments about it. But it does actually really help me. It does not solve all the problems. I joined Adam when he went to go get a tattoo earlier this week, and I have a design and art background, so he wanted my opinion on the layout and like the composition and whatever. But there's a lot of cleaning supplies in there, and even if they're not fragrant, I have found that cleaning supplies tend to go right through the type of mask. They don't go through like a full-on respirator that's got the removable filters. But those are not very like one. They're a big statement to wear in public. They get a lot of looks, and I look like I'm like on my lunch break from going to do something illegal with them. I don't know, hazmat, like I have my job in hazmat or something, which would maybe be the most poorly fitted job for me ever. On a long list of jobs I can't do. But they're also uncomfortable. They put a lot of pressure on your sinuses, and so I wear them for projects in my house if I'm renovating something. In the middle of renovating an old camper that had some mold and potentially asbestos. Like that's the kind of thing I tend to wear that stuff for, but that would work a lot better. Part of the issue with going out into public though is that I also find I have big curly hair, much Candice and I both have big curly hair. It's a thing we got going. And I find that because curly hair is porous and drier than for the most part, typically, that it absorbs fragrances even better than hair that has a lot more oil or that's like has a different texture to it. And so I find that I have to also wear a hat to go into most stores. Like going into bathrooms in almost any public space are a challenge for me, even with a mask on, because I will react to my clothing and my hair after I take the mask off, like when I get in my car. So it does help, and it reduces my allergic reactions a lot, and it makes a lot of things more accessible to me. But it has the drawbacks of like my clothing and hair can still be an issue. And also I find that people, and I think part of this is COVID politicizing masks to the degree it did, and also it being like a barrier for some people to understand what you're saying, especially with like auditory processing issues or hearing issues, that people don't engage with me as much in public when I'm wearing them. And that's a bummer because I am an extremely extroverted person who loves talking to literally anybody. So it helps me in a lot of ways, and it does unfortunately have some drawbacks. But overall, I wear masks in public, I would say, unless I'm outdoors 100% of the time. I don't even know that if COVID disappeared tomorrow, I don't know that I could go back to not wearing a mask in public most of the time because of the fragrances.
Mm-hmm. So mine aren't as severe as yours, but I do carry like a cloth mask with several filters in it. The brand is Vogue mask. I think they kind
I've
of
used that one,
rose
yeah.
in prominence. I have like two of those, and they stay in my purse or in my car. And especially when I go into places that are highly fragrant, I'll wear one. So every now and then, if I do risk Sephora or Ulta or something, I of course have that on. But in those scenarios, I often wish I had an additional mask on because the scent is really severe. And I do tend to still react to my hair afterwards if I'm in there for too long and the scent is too sticky. But the Vogue mask usually handles most scenarios where the fragrance is going to bother me. And for me, that looks like clearing of my throat, maybe stuffy nose, watery eyes, but also brain fog. And depending on the severity, it can be some like stomach stuff too. But um, I'm not risking anaphylaxis. I'm just mad that I'm smelling all this stuff that I know is going to make me feel like crap later.
It's really
Not to
crazy
mention
how
having to go
far
wash
some
your
places
hair.
go with their fragrance, like how sickly, like strong it is, even for someone that's not reactive. I mean, I've always had that opinion, I would never want to go into Bath and Body Works or whatever, or some of these places where it's so noxious that I can't
Mhm.
imagine how it must feel for y'all, you know?
I'm just like slightly pulling out my soapbox here, and then I'm going to put it away because we can have a whole other episode about this. But a lot of stores these days are pumping it through the HVAC
Yes.
system.
They pay you like
They
a
even did it
subscription.
recently. It's wild. Adam and I have a roommate who works in property management for some high end like rentals and stuff in some different cities. And at one point, the place he was working a few jobs ago, they had such a powerful scent thing through their HVAC system that he would have to like rush up the stairs when he walked in the door and immediately shower and then put all of his clothes in the garage. Um, and he ended up living there for like a
Adam.
year and then decided it wasn't Adam. I'm sorry, it was our roommate
All right.
Dante.
Okay, got it.
Adam has been through plenty of his own stuff, but this happened to be my roommate, and he wanted to he had moved out for work and then decided to move back in, and he had to get rid of all of his furniture because he had lived there and it was so potent. It like went under the door and seeped into everything of fabric. And we obviously like worked with him to figure out how to make that a feasible thing
Mhm.
because he's family, so we wanted him to live with us. But it's like the way people do these things definitely make lives of, according to several international studies, 30% of the population have some kind of fragrance sensitivity. So while mine is abnormally severe, and that might be the case for other mast cell patients, you are not alone. There are a lot of other people who react in
Mhm.
different ways.
I just find that it's become so prevalent in ways that like recently, in ways that I just never would have anticipated. When I go into a restaurant, there shouldn't be plugins in every corner. Like, why? Why? It's a restaurant. It already smells nice. There's like food scents and it's lovely. Why am I also, and I won't even necessarily smell the fragrance. I'll just start reacting. And if I'm like aware enough in the moment, I'll realize that's what's happening and I'll start looking for where is it? Because it's somewhere.
That's part of what helped me stop gaslighting myself is that I started reacting to things I couldn't smell. And I have,
Mhm.
unlike Adam, who, yeah, I'm the reason he's convinced he doesn't have a sense of smell because I may have convinced him that because recently we had a vehicle that was like diesel fumes were getting in the cab and he didn't smell it. And I like knew it instantly, almost after I was done gaslighting myself about it. But if you can't smell it and you're still reacting, so like obviously it's not in your head.
Right. I had a similar experience, and maybe I've already shared it on the podcast. I can't remember, but I had a coworker. She and I were in a little huddle room in the office, and she knew that I had a sensitivity. But we're in there, and I had been fine. And then all of a sudden, I was like, I couldn't stop, like, kind of coughing. I was like clearing my throat constantly. It was becoming a real problem. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on. There must be something in the air in here. And she was like, oh my God, I didn't think about it this morning and I put my perfume on. And I was like, but I don't smell your perfume. I don't think it's your perfume. I was like very convinced. She's like, no, it's gotta be my perfume. I was like, babe, I don't smell it. I don't think that's it. It can't be it because I don't smell it. And she was very convinced. So she finally opened the door and like let it air out some. It was 100% her perfume that I couldn't even smell. And just having some circulation like helped almost instantly. It was that. So similarly, I realized, yeah, it's not just the scent and me not liking the scent and me worrying about if the scent's going to make me react. It is an actual reaction regardless.
And speaking of things that not everyone believes or understands around mast cell diseases,
Mm.
I'd love to ask what everyone else thinks is like the biggest misconception or like, I guess misconception is the best word I can think of around mastocytosis and mast cell diseases. Adam, do you want to answer that one first?
Biggest misconception. I think a lot of the times, and we talk to a lot of other patients as well, but like a lot of the times you get a diagnosis and no matter what it is, you kind of for most other things, you get a diagnosis and you have an idea of what it might be. Whereas with mastocytosis, you get the diagnosis and it could be anything. So, people start going in and reading all of everyone else's experiences and things like that. And it's the experience that you have could be wildly different from anything that you read online. You can have some of the symptoms of this person, some of the symptoms of that person. So the idea that it is your diagnosis tells you what you're going to experience with mastocytosis is unfortunately very misleading. You're really not going to have the same experience as someone else with this particular disease. I think to me that's the biggest misconception.
I really appreciate that. Rachel and I have talked about that probably on every episode, and we probably will on every episode. It is what they call a heterogeneous disease, meaning every single person, to your point, Adam, experiences it differently. There may be overlap, and that's cool because you can find like ways to relate to someone. But a lot of people who are newly diagnosed or who maybe are caretakers and trying to understand the disease have this idea that, okay, what should I cook? What can they eat? What can they, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. You can't, there is no diet you can follow that's perfect for everyone. A lot of people will come in and say, you have to go on a low histamine diet. And it does work for some people. It is not a universal answer, full stop. Like some people do not respond to it and instead are limiting themselves from necessary nutrition. So I really appreciate you pointing that out because that is a big one.
Yeah. And it's I don't know. I'm sure that there are a lot more misconceptions out there, but I'm struggling to think of any other ones. Fuck. Have you thought of any others?
So I have, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think the biggest misconception I've seen is people kind of just blatantly being like, oh, well, if that sets you off, just like don't do that thing. Or like, if you can't go to that place, just like don't go to that place. Like the misconception that like, well, if your accommodation is going to quote unquote inconvenience someone else, then you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't need to ask, like you shouldn't ask other people to change just for you or whatever. And that's just so ridiculous. And I think it makes people afraid to ask for accommodations. But there are a lot of people out there who are more than happy to accommodate and really want to know what is going to make this person's like life easier, what's going to make this person's experience easier or better. And also the misconception that it's it's just allergies, But I think like the just don't go to that place if it bothers you is like very not well thought out and like ableist. I think there are many, many accommodations that can be made. And yeah, there are choices like this place is gonna set me off or this situation is gonna set me off, but it's worth going through that to like live my life. But yeah, I think that misconception by mostly, I would say, able-bodied people, but
Not always.
and not always, just anybody. Well, I don't ask for accommodations for myself, so why should you, you know?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So I
You
think it's
also
it's not as
mentioned,
simple as that.
yeah, totally. You mentioned the oh, it's just allergies thing. And I do think that is a fully separate podcast, and we are going to discuss like IgE mediated allergies, which is kind of what most folks with an allergy have, and then mastocytosis or a mast cell disease, which is different. It can go together, but they're not the same. So like I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again and many times I'm sure. I've been tested for allergies and I don't have any.
I have
And
a
yet
few, but none of them are the things I really react to. It's like grass
exactly.
and a couple of trees,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
for me, those actually are avoidable. Fragrances are not.
Right. Yeah, this idea that it's just allergies. But then there's this other side where it's like, but how do I explain that to someone? It's way easier to just say I'm allergic. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
it just to not get into the finer points of it. But it is more complicated than that. And if someone's trying to understand it or who's having to deal with it as a caretaker or a partner, it's helpful to know that it's not that simple.
Yeah. I think you guys have already addressed the that this one item is what you're reacting to, and it's going to be the same reaction with the same exposure every time, but
Mm,
it's not. The
mhm,
misconception that oh, I can get a handle on this, and I know that it's this and this, but it changes every day
mhm,
based on where you're at. And also there are new things that develop, and
mhm.
um
Yeah, I've just started developing cutaneous mastocytosis.
Welcome to the club.
So we talked about misconceptions, but I'm really curious about. So there's no wrong answers to this, and I would love as much honesty as you're willing to give. But have there ever been symptoms that you found hard to believe were real? I know that all of you are very supportive, and I know that all of you want to be really accommodating. But this is a complicated disease, and I think a lot of caregivers struggle with this. So I'm curious, and Denny, I'll have you start. Yeah, has there been part of it that's been hard to
Yeah.
believe?
I mean, I'll be honest because like I try to start from a place of compassion, but obviously, there are these times when like just a thought will flash up in your brain where like, is this uh scent really bothering her, or is the worry about the scent making the anxiety generating a real physical response? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
I
yeah, I
question
mean,
that myself,
yeah,
so that's
and
fair.
Same.
and just because it's such a weird nebulous disease, some of the symptoms, it's not like a direct A/B correlation. So yeah, I think that's something that I know it's real, but in those moments, I'm like, is it? You know what I mean?
Mhm,
But then I have to come back and be like, you know, is uh, it's obviously not something that she would go to all this effort to just make up, you know what I mean? And it's obvious that she's feeling like shit, so, yeah, it's like a like, thing, and then you're quickly like and even it's like, even if it is the anxiety, it's still causing real symptoms, you know what I mean? So,
mhm,
like, no matter what the mechanism is, it is causing harm, so let's minimize the harm, you know what I mean?
mhm.
So that's it.
We question Rachel, yeah, you were gonna chime in as well, but I question myself.
Yeah, and I don't think you sound like a jerk. I think these are questions I ask myself, and I think it's sometimes it's like a chicken and the egg thing, like
Mhm,
if my anxiety is severe enough. There was like a moment earlier this month where I was having some insurance issues and I thought I wasn't going to be able to access my medicine, and like when there's really intense stress, that does cause an allergic reaction.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that that's a thing, and it doesn't happen often, I don't think, but it does happen some of the time. Probably particularly more frequently, like around like my period too, like that my menstrual cycle really affects my symptoms. And so I think that like if I'm questioning it and if Candace's questioning it, of course it makes sense that like that thought might go through the people in our lives' brains as well.
But then I feel guilt because, like, you feel like you're I mean, not unintentionally, but you feel like you're minimizing their experience in a way, you know what I mean?
yeah. I experience that with you sometimes too, like on the days when your fatigue is high or I do the thing, "Well, have you had enough water? Well, did you wear your CPAP last night? Well, did you" and I'll kinda go through this litany of things, or I'll be like, "Ugh, maybe he just wants to lay around today." I'm guilty of it too, and I have to check myself to be like, "No, this is we both experience these things, and I can come at this from a place of compassion and understanding." But it's back to that comment I made before about I can have this knee-jerk reaction that I have to, like, take a step back, and it's fine, and
Yeah.
I can
We all have
accommodate
that,
this,
like,
and I can.
little part of our mind that's cynical, you know what I mean? And
Mhm,
I tend to, when I was my family is very cynical, and I kind of was, like, basted in that as a kid, but I was also a very curious kid, and I quickly realized that cynicism is the enemy of curiosity, and um and trying to like learn about the world and how the world really works, I was like, okay, I'm going to need to dial down the cynicism a bit. And so now whenever I had that immediate cynical thought, I'd have to just tell myself, like, come from a place of curiosity, don't just assume, you know and so
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, Adam, have you had an experience of struggling with the accepting or believing or.
I haven't had a problem with except like the symptoms. Like I've always believed Rachel, from the very get about how she was feeling. Because why would you say these?
Right.
To me, once like, why would you say these things about how you're feeling? And if, well, one, if I could clearly see it on your face,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, I think sometimes it's not the symptoms that I have trouble with; it's the triggers because I know that there can be so many of them. So whenever I see symptoms in Rachel, you know, I'm just playing through all the things that we've done that day, all the things that we could have come in contact with. I mean, whether it's that day, I mean, hell, the trigger could have been the day before, and this is just something that is rearing its head now. So it's when, and I don't know if this is better, but when Rachel says that I think it's this, I have trouble believing that the trigger that she thinks it is actually what it is because it could be so many things. And I think and we've said it before. It's like sometimes it's just you're guessing, you're putting a shot in the dark to see what it might have been. And if you did have that journal that you could look back on it, I still don't think that you could pinpoint what it was. So that's to me, that's what I struggle with. It's not believing the symptoms, it's understanding and trying to figure out what the trigger was for that symptom.
Yeah, and
I
it's a
never
lot of
thought of it
guesswork.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I like that's super valid. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, I think it's this. And you're like, is it this thing? I was in this room and maybe it's my clothes. Let me go change. And you know what? You go and change. And I was sure it wasn't that. But afterwards, I felt better. So,
Yeah, exactly. Like I was just sitting next to you on the couch and it's like, maybe it's me. So I go change and take a shower and it's like, oh, I feel better. I'm like, well, I guess that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
it's a guessing game, though. And it's a tough one. What about you, Puck?
I think, uh, coming back to the interpersonal stuff, I look through at a lot of stuff through an interpersonal lens because I'm a psychology background and into that stuff. But I think for me, it's like you said that sometimes we resolve something, and then when you're having an allergic reaction, it comes back around in your head, and then it becomes like a fixation because of the fight or flight, the chemicals that are going on. And then my questioning is like, oh, well, how much of this is an allergic reaction and how much of this is, oh, this is something you are actually still upset about? Or like sometimes it's like, and not to minimize, but like when you're having an allergic reaction, maybe making like a bigger deal out of something than you usually would. And it's like, oh, well, where can I don't know where to find the line of like, this much is what you were actually upset about. And then this much is,
Yeah.
like,
This is your reaction. This is
yeah,
brought
this
on
sort of like
by.
exaggerated reaction is because of
Mhm.
the trigger, whatever it was.
I kind of
Mhm.
think that sometimes giving like short illustrations of like these things playing out makes more sense. So, like, as an example, Puck and I went to a holiday party last year, or the year before, and we got there early. And so I just had one mask on because it was a huge room and there weren't many people there. And, that was fine for my allergies. And I was enjoying myself and talking to people and didn't realize that as like the room started filling up, I didn't put another mask on. And for me, as I said, like one mask does not block out much of the fragrances. And I had been annoyed with Puck for asking me to drive there because I didn't want to drive. And instead of just saying something about it, which I should have done, I was like, fine, I'll drive. And then I was cranky driving the whole time. And by the time we got to the hotel we were at, I was fine. Like I was over it. I was like, listen, next time I just need to advocate for myself and say that I didn't feel like driving and we could have talked it out. But as more people started filling into the room, all of a sudden I was like, I don't even know when that it started, but all of a sudden I was like really upset about it again. Like I had totally gotten over it. This was like 4 or 5 hours earlier. And I was just really frustrated. And we went like we went for a walk around the hotel. And next thing I know, I'm crying about it and really upset. And Puck was like, after about 20 seconds of me talking, Puck was like, I think you're having an allergic reaction. And I was like, wait, really? And then like I put another mask on, took some antihistamines, and 20 minutes later I was fine. I wasn't upset anymore. It sounds made up. I'm the one experiencing it and saying it, and I still think it sounds made up. So like, I don't think I could clearly identify where that line is for how angry or upset or frustrated or whatever emotion I'm feeling, where I would feel assuming that there were no other factors at play versus where where that bar is for me having, what's likely some kind of brain inflammation or chemicals that cause inflammation in my brain or whatever else chaos is going on inside of my body. And so I think that and that's been an interesting one to navigate as far as symptoms go, because it's really only been an issue the last 2.5 years or so. I think since some of my other symptoms have been more managed, because in a room full of people wearing perfume, before I would have had some big physical symptom that would have been oh no, I'm having an allergic reaction, and I would have taken action then. And
It's
feelings are a lot more subtle. It's so much more subtle, but it's just as impactful.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a tangent off of that, but I think it's worth noting that when we have interpersonal struggles, so when we argue, a lot of times very early on, you'll start to get flushed.
Mm-hmm.
We can see you're starting to have an allergic reaction, you're hot.
I hate
and
conflict.
Then you
Yeah.
get brain fog, and it's hard to
finish talking things out.
Yeah, it's hard to finish talking things out, and it's hard for you to find your words.
Mhm.
And then it's hard to even tell what we were upset about in the first place or how upset you were about something in the first place. So it's navigating those talks in a way that's both sensitive to our relationship and sensitive to your needs.
Sometimes that we were dealing with something a bigger issue when we talked it out, and the same thing was happening where I was flushing and whatever, because that kind of thing
triggers.
stresses me. It stresses me out. I'm not great. Those conversations are hard to have with anybody, especially people you care so much about. Where at the end, we'll kind of come up with some kind of resolution that feels good to both of us. And I'll be okay, but I need you to write it down now, because I will forget it because my brain's not working right. And then the next day I'll be okay, but can you tell me what to write down, because I'm having trouble articulating my thoughts into words now. So we'll do that together, and it'll just be I have a note-taking app on my phone, and it'll just be a few lines, but that's really helpful because I might not remember this. I'll remember that we had a conversation. I'll know what the topic we talked about, but I'll forget some of the specifics.
Yeah.
Or it'll just seem a little fuzzy afterwards. And that can kind of, if we don't address it the right way, means it becomes an issue again when it doesn't need to be.
Well, it's a good way of using a tool to help you. Yeah, that's great. That's a really good coping mechanism, I guess is the word I was looking for. Yeah, well, even in talking about this is, again, we always allude to future episodes, but one of the things, we need to talk about mast cell biology at some point with an expert. And we do plan on doing all these things. So anyone listening, just know we are working on setting up interviews with experts. So you'll hear a lot of that. But obviously in this, we want to focus on the patient experience. But understanding and helping our caregivers understand that it's like a loop, right? So sometimes you can set off a reaction through anxiety, trauma, stress, this kind of thing. It'll set off a mast cell reaction and then enhance all those things and also lead to flushing or whatever your symptoms might look like. And then there's also the opposite, where you're fine, everything's been good, but something is a trigger and it sets off the mast cells, and that causes additional anxiety, fear. We talked about this, Rachel, before in anaphylaxis. Almost everyone talks about that sense of doom. There is an emotional reaction that comes with mast cell degranulation that is not triggered by emotion. It's the mast cell triggering the emotion. So it goes both ways. And knowing what that is can be challenging unless you're just so constantly monitoring yourself, which is hard to do sometimes. I'm similar.
And exhausting.
Oh, God. So exhausting.
And it's hard to monitor yourself when your faculties are already
limited.
Absolutely.
Compromised.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to get really kind of granular about that and understand sort of the mechanism of action. But I think it's really important for family, for partners, anybody who's there kind of helping you navigate life with a chronic disease to understand that it's not personal. It's not I'm not trying to be really angry about nothing. I'm probably experiencing something that is triggering that reaction. Not to say that we all have anger, we all have whatever. I can recognize those emotions when I have them, but sometimes they do feel completely outside of myself. And I think that's important for everyone around you to kind of grasp as well.
Yeah, and Candice,
Mhm.
you said that you really want to get granular. Are you sure you didn't want to get granular? Sorry. I'm sorry. Just had to. It was right there.
I knew there was a dad joke coming.
I'm pretty sure Denny's just mad it wasn't him. I love it. That's great.
All right, just checking.
I know we talked about talking about some questions about dating with mastocytosis or mast cell diseases. And honestly, I think that might be a really great, completely separate episode we could address on and maybe take questions from listeners about and stuff like that. And
Sure. I think that's great. I know you lead a support group on like sex and relationships with mastocytosis. And so maybe some of your support group members would be interested in like submitting questions for a broader
yeah,
conversation. And yeah, I'll definitely continue to solicit from listeners and people who follow us on socials and stuff. Um, I think that's great. And then I think we can talk about that with future folks living with SM who join us on the podcast to tell us their stories. I think obviously relationships are such a critical part of our lives and it impacts pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Um, this has been really fantastic for me personally. It's just been really nice to meet Puck and Adam and to hear more from y'all. And it's always very strange to hear your partner talk about you kind of to other people. But I know for me, it's helpful for me to see myself through the eyes of other people. And it's always nice when it's the people who love you because that's a much rosier version. But, it's validating to hear that.
think so much about like, and this is kind of, it just kind of affirms like some strong beliefs I have about how important community, like not just partners necessarily, but like, I mean, I have friends. Like, I could, like if we wanted to have a much larger group of people on here, and that would be way harder to navigate. But like, I feel so fortunate to have like the people in my life that I do, and I think I think it makes my life so much more manageable and livable. I just,
Mhm.
and this kind of just reaffirms that more so that like, and I think also I hear a lot of stuff in the support group that I run about people who kind of don't feel like there's people out there who'd want to quote unquote put up with the difficult parts of being around or dating or interacting with people with mast cell diseases in general. And I get part of what I wanted to show folks from this episode was that like that's not accurate. Like there are
Mhm.
people, I run into a ton of people who are not as supportive, who are not as
Mhm.
considerate, who are not as willing to be accommodating. And you know what? It sucks, but it's okay. Like those aren't people I need to spend my time on.
Mhm.
Like every other ADHDer I know, have 7 trillion hobbies. So I've got plenty on my plate anyway. And I'd rather focus my energy and the spoons and bandwidth I do have on the people who like uplift me and support me. And those people do exist. And like,
Mhm.
I'm
Well,
really
I think
fortunate to find so many.
it's easy to feel like you're too much. And I mean, I feel like I've felt that way in relationships long before my diagnosis because I can be
Same.
emotional and I'm very communicative and I need that in a partner and someone who's willing to talk things out or have conflict or, whatever and resolve it. And I always felt like too much in that way, but then add on to it a chronic disease that I now have to manage that will impact my partner's life very directly in day-to-day living. For me personally, I really had a moment where I was just like, if you don't want this, I understand. Like, I get it. And I love you enough and respect you enough to not want to deny you the future you imagined for yourself or in a partnership or something. So like that's a lot of heavy things to deal with, but I think we're stronger for it.
I think I frame it a little bit differently that like, if I think I am not like considered thing, but I feel like I have a lot of confidence. I think I'm a great person. I'm awesome. I'm a lot of fun to hang out with, most of the time. Assuming I'm not having like a very emotional allergic reaction, maybe less fun in those instances. But if people aren't willing to like, if I'm not everyone's cup of tea, that's okay. I want to be like, I want to find the people who are a right fit for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah,
And
loss.
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not really on dating apps at the moment, but like in general, I put in there like usually some kind of joke about like my allergies, like anaphylaxis isn't my kink, so please be willing to accommodate. Like I'm allergic to fragrances.
Yeah, right.
And you know what? I know there's other folks who have sensitivities and stuff like that, and they don't, or disabilities, and they don't want to put it out there because they don't want people to turn them down because of those things. But I would rather those people turn me down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Find out
I'm
up front.
busy. I love doing
Yes.
things. I don't want to waste my time. I'm busy,
Yeah.
and I'd rather make space for the right things.
And that's nice when meeting new people because you can do that. In the scenario where like Adam and Denny both experienced, that wasn't who they started dating. That wasn't who they fell in love with. That's the person that has become. And it can just be a different thing. And not everybody's built to handle it. And that's hard. And it's
That's
hard
true.
for me to want to be not want to be a burden, but recognizing that sometimes it's a burden is challenging. And I don't ever want that to be someone else's problem. Also knowing that I would take that on without blinking an eye. Like, okay, this is where we are now, so we'll do that. And I totally understand that there's somebody there who's willing to do that. And obviously I found that person, but I also understand that not everybody's equipped, and it does suck. But to your point, yeah, absolutely. I'd rather them not be here. Like, okay, thanks, move on. I'm pretty independent. I'll figure it out. It'll be okay.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty good advice for people out there that are trying to date. It's like there are people that will be compassionate. You don't have to I know dating is a numbers game and oftentimes it sucks and you might not feel like you want to limit that pool, but you're going to do that anyway. Like you're going to end up putting effort in and then that's not the right person and then they're gone anyway. So it's better I think to, you know, uh I hate to say this cuz I work in marketing, but find your target market by being upfront about it and saying this is my life and only people that can, that can keep up with that are worth investing time in, you know?
Mm, Denny, to talk to your point, it's like that's good advice for anybody, not just if you have a chronic illness or anything like that. That's the person that you should, in my opinion, that's the person that you should be looking for, no matter who you are. The person who will give you that compassion, will understand what you're, or wants to understand what you're going through. That's the kind of partner that I want to be to everyone, but it should also be the one that you're looking for, in my opinion.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Support's always the best way to go. You all have been so wonderful. Thank you for, bringing your honesty and sharing with our audience what it is to be a caregiver. I think it's really important for other caregivers to hear this too. And for our listeners, we would love to hear from you. What has your experience been? How has your caregiver stepped up for you, or what challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them, or have you had to move on and find the right people? I love to hear people's stories, and I'm really curious what people's experiences have been. I know it hasn't always been good for everyone, but I do hope that at least from this conversation, folks can take away that it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
bad all the time.
And if folks want to share their stories with us, either in writing that they send to us, with your permission, if you'd let us, we'd love to share that on one of our episodes. Or, and I know at some point we want to speak to folks
Yeah,
more directly and hear.
We'll start having people on for sure. But I still, please, yeah, write in. You can email us. You can find us on Facebook and send a DM. I'm on a lot of the support groups on Facebook, and I post our episodes there to try and get them to everybody. But please don't be shy. Let us know. Also, send us your questions. If there's a topic that we brought up that you're really interested in and you have specific questions, we will keep a log of those things, and it's going to inform episodes going forward. Really, really open to that. In fact, we want it. So please. That said, I think it's a good place to wrap up. This has been great. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for sharing.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us, Adam and Denny and
Yeah,
Poppy.
thank
Really
you.
appreciate you guys.
It's been
I
great.
can't wait to meet folks in person. I'm looking
Same.
forward to that. So with that, we'll sign off. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Mastcast. Your hosts are not medical professionals, and nothing discussed here should be taken as medical advice. Please speak to your medical provider about any issues you're experiencing or therapies you're interested in. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at podhost@mastcastpod.com.